Prime Minister indicated that he wants to have a carbon tax election on his plan to quadruple the tax to 61 cents a litre on heat, gas, and groceries. So will he confirm whether or not he considers my motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off a confidence vote?
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Cypher.
And I'm Fox. We're back to question period today, where Pierre continued to hammer Trudeau on the carbon tax and his motion coming on Monday. We also dive into what the NDP think about the Conservative motion.
Let's take a look.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister paused the pain of the carbon tax for only some people. The Liberal Rural Affairs Minister said, well, other people should have elected Liberal MPs if they wanted to be able to afford heating their home or feeding their kids. The Prime Minister has not denounced that viewpoint. In fact, he's doubling down on punishing people elsewhere. But Liberal MPs in Sudbury, Thunder Bay, North Bay, Sault Ste. Marie, they have starving constituents who are worried about the heat going out as well. Will they have a free vote on my motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off for everyone this Monday?
Yeah, Rhoda, maybe you can redeem yourself by actually voting to support your constituents.
Right. And that was really important what Pierre just said. He mentioned he asked Trudeau if his MPs are going to be able to have a free vote on Monday to be able to actually, vote on what they think. Now, we've touched on this before, and usually in Canadian politics, the members of Parliament vote with their party. That's the rule. And then if they don't, they could face discipline from the party. This is why we were kind of curious as to what kind of happened with Ken MacDonald, and we're surmising at least part of his punishment is that he wasn't allowed to be present for the announcement that Trudeau made the other week about the fact that they were going to put a quote-unquote pause on the carbon tax in his part of Canada, because it also affects Newfoundland. So we're surmising that was part of the punishment. Now, a free vote is essentially the party allowing the MPs to vote however they wish, and they are not going to direct them one way or the other. So I find this very interesting that Pierre is, again, poking the backbench of the Liberal Party to say, come on, stand up. Ken's already done it. Trudeau, are you courageous enough to actually let your MPs do that?
So these ridings that Pierre has mentioned specifically are currently Liberal-held ridings, but if you go and look at the projections, they're going to turn blue, which is why he's mentioning them specifically, because he's reminding these MPs, if you guys keep staying the course and keep doing what you're doing, your seat is turning blue.
Right. But again, this is the no-win scenario that we talked about last week. Pierre is putting the Liberals in between a rock and a hard place. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. Because if they don't, then all they're going to do is reinforce Pierre's message that Liberals don't care about Canadians, and they're only going to care about specific ridings that they want to protect. But these ridings that Fox mentioned are under significant threat from the Conservatives. The projections actually project them to win if an election was held today in these ridings. So if the Liberals turn around and then vote with the Conservatives in these ridings, what does that say? Well, it says the Conservatives are right, so they're still screwed. So there's no way out of this where Justin Trudeau is the winner. And all of this was caused by Justin Trudeau. Ironically, if he had just kept the carbon tax in Eastern Canada, it would have been terrible for Eastern Canada Canadians still, but it probably would have dragged out his chances longer. The fact that he's fractured his most significant Canadian policy that he's been touting for years now, it's going to fall like a house of cards, like we've said, and you're seeing it. You're seeing all of the fallout. The Conservatives smell blood, and they are just going after this full steam ahead.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, as a government, we're phasing out the use of coal because it's dirty and bad for the environment. We're now moving on phasing out home heating oil because it's dirtier, more expensive, and is disproportionately relied upon by lower-income Canadians who don't have other choices. Over 500,000 Ontarians, Mr. Speaker, heat their homes with home heating oil. This program and this approach will not just give them a break, but in working with the Government of Ontario, will deliver heat pumps for Canadians right across the country. I invite Saskatchewan to work with us as well. We need to get Canadians off home heating oil. That's what we're going to do.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
With an answer like that, he's clearly not worth the cost, and he didn't answer the question as to whether or not his MPs would have a free vote, which begs the question whether his NDP MPs will get a free vote. This Saskatchewan NDP has just voted to endorse my motion to give equal tax-free heat for all Canadians. That is the position of the NDP in BC, Manitoba, and Alberta as well. Now the question is whether the NDP will vote against its cash-strapped constituents and in favor of the Prime Minister. So can the PM tell us, is this vote part of the coalition agreement, or does the NDP have the freedom to vote for their constituents?
And this is the wedge between the NDP and the Liberals.
Wow.
Like, he's just driving in a pry bar and just pulling and pulling and pulling and driving them apart. And the way he's using the provincial NDPs as the leverage to actually get this pushed and done is just, it's awesome. It's really interesting to see the political maneuvering going on here.
Well, and the way that Pierre asked Trudeau if he's going to permit the NDP MPs a free vote is very significant.
It is.
I mean, it's showing Canadians that Jagmeet Singh is not the leader of the NDP. Justin Trudeau is the leader of the NDP.
Well, and it also really, really fires a shot at Jagmeet Singh's pride, because he's basically belittling him, saying, you don't run the NDP. Trudeau runs the NDP. You can stand up and say whatever you want, but you keep voting for them. Ergo, you don't run that party. Justin Trudeau does. So it's to also get under the skin of Jagmeet and kind of use some reverse psychology there. Like, you're going to stand up? You're going to be a man? You're going to be a man and actually run your own party? Come on. Right? So the psychological aspect to this cannot be understated, like Fox said.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition wants to talk about places across the country. Let's talk about them. 20,000 Saskatchewanians heat their homes with home heating oil. 50,000 Albertans and about 100,000 British Columbians, Mr. Speaker. That is dirty, it is more polluting, and it is more expensive, particularly for the predominantly lower income families that rely on this. That's why we're moving forward to replace them with heat pumps, working with the provinces to deliver free heat pumps for lower income families so that they can save money and fight pollution at the same time. This is about helping Canadians as we fight climate change, which the Leader of the Opposition has no plan for.
L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the
Prime Minister save his political bacon, Mr. Speaker. And we know that because he's now admitted that his carbon tax is not worth the cost of oil for some people in some regions. My motion simply says that all Canadians get the same break. After all, a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. Yesterday, the Prime Minister indicated that he wants to have a carbon tax election on his plan to quadruple the tax to 61 cents a litre on heat, gas, and groceries. So will he confirm whether or not he considers my motion to keep the heat on and take the tax off a confidence vote?
That's interesting. The answer will be no. But that's interesting. That's the first time you've heard of a confidence vote come out of Pierre's mouth. That's very interesting.
Do you think we're going to get a confidence vote before the Christmas break?
Unlikely.
Yeah, I'm always hopeful, of course, but as far as I understand, the NDP has a confidence in supply agreement until December 31st.
Here's the thing, right? So let's play this out. So if the NDP called a confidence vote on Monday, and if they voted with the Conservatives, and the government fell, Governor General would dissolve Parliament and an election would be called within 30 days. You have a December election. Canadians aren't going to like a December election.
No, there is a little bit of leeway. I don't know if there's enough time to go until January. I think it's 40 to 56 days. I can't quite remember. Government is responsible for calling federal elections and by-elections. An election period must be a minimum of 36 days and a maximum of 50 days.
That's a Christmas election.
Yeah, that's a Christmas election. And
Not gonna
that's the
happen.
maximum. The minimum would be...
Well, yeah, the minimum would be the second week of December.
Yeah. Unlikely, but I suppose technically possible.
It's technically possible.
But unlikely.
Plus, the NDP aren't ready at this point to have a confidence vote. It'll be
After December 31st.
It'll be after.
Yeah.
They'll want to get their ducks in a row in order to do that. So I think what this is Pierre rattling Justin Trudeau's cage. And considering what happens after this that we'll get into, I think it's very interesting.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, home heating oil is dirtier, more expensive, and more relied on by lower-income Canadians across the country. 1.3 million households across this country rely on home heating oil. That's why we're working with the provinces that want to replace them for free with heat pumps. That's what this is about. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is making a serious mistake if he thinks that Canadians are not concerned about the environment, or that Canadians don't know that protecting the environment does go hand in hand with creating good jobs and prosperity for them across the country. That is a conversation I look forward to continuing to have over the next 2 years with Canadians.
So that's interesting that he didn't answer the question aside from saying over the next 2 years. So
He's hoping it's going to be 2 years. I think the rest of us know it's probably going to be spring.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On Monday, the NDP will have the opportunity to show who they work for, the Prime Minister or Canadians who want the tax off and the heat on. It's cold in Edmonton, and yet Edmontonians are being penalized as a result of this NDP Liberal government's punitive carbon tax on home heating. So, is the Liberal minister from Edmonton going to order the NDP MP for Edmonton Griesbach to once again vote against his constituents, or will he be permitted to vote with Conservatives to axe the tax and keep the heat on?
Yeah, Cooper.
yeah, and we know the answer to that. We know the answer to that. So, shortly after question period ended, the NDP gave their answer. Okay? So this is Peter Julian. He's one of Jagmeet Singh's right-hand guys of the NDP. There's only a few to choose from because they have so few MPs. But this is what they said.
So we'll be voting yes on the motion that's coming up for a vote next week. We believe that the panicked reaction of Liberals a few days ago, it seemed to be tied to electoral chances more than anything else, to create a situation where in certain parts of the country people receive some support in a difficult winter where they're struggling to make ends meet and to keep their homes heated, and other Canadians wouldn't benefit from that. Last year, we tried to get the GST taken off home heating right across this country. Conservatives and Liberals refused to do that. Today, again, we tried to amend this motion by ensuring that the GST was taken off home heating. The reality is that's a much more equitable way of doing it. It gives the same benefit to people who are struggling to make ends meet, to put food on the table, to keep a roof over their head, and to heat their homes.
So this was driving us nuts, and I swear I've got a one-track mind. Once I set my mind to something, I absolutely have to see it through to completion. So I went digging and digging and digging, and we finally found what the NDP were referring to. It's not a vote.
It's not a motion.
It is an amendment to a Conservative motion. Debate for this took place on October the 20th of last year, so 2022. And you can find the text in Hansard on that date. And what it was they were debating the Conservative motion to remove the carbon tax from home heating.
So this is what the amendment said. This is from Peter Julian, the guy who you were just hearing, that is going on and on and on and on and on about the fact that the Conservatives didn't support the NDP's motion. So it wasn't a motion. As Fox said, the Conservatives put forth a motion to remove the carbon tax from home heating, which is exactly the same as the motion that they're talking about today. So Peter Julian stands up and says, "It is with my pleasure that I offer the following amendment on behalf of the NDP, and if good sense and good judgment take place, the Conservatives will support it. I move that the motion be amended by deleting the words from the carbon tax and substituting the following from the goods and service tax." So what the NDP were proposing was to scrap the whole notion of removing the carbon tax from home heating and only focusing on the GST. So this is why the Conservatives didn't support it, because it's not an either-or motion. It's a replacement motion. So it completely changes the nature of the actual motion from the Conservatives.
Yeah, the Conservatives put forth this motion, or you can find this on our commons.ca. It's vote number 197 within the 44th session of Parliament. And it was sponsored by Pierre Poilievre. And basically, it did what it says on the tin. It was to take the take the carbon tax off of home heating.
It's a carbon copy, excuse the pun, of the exact motion that they put forth yesterday. So it's the exact same thing. What's the difference this time around? Now the NDP are supporting this.
Well, last time the NDP wanted this amendment made, and it's not even an amendment. It would have changed the bill entirely, as Cypher said. So the Conservatives obviously said no, because the NDP would be entirely changing their motion. If the NDP want a motion with the GST removed, they're more than welcome to submit that to Parliament. I think what they were trying to do was trying to placate their voters by saying, oh, well, we need the carbon tax because it's for pollution. We need to keep this price on pollution, but we'll take off the GST instead.
And then what would have happened is Jagmeet would have stood up and crapped all over the Conservatives for saying, see, we changed their motion and, we put this forward and yada, 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 and credit to us. But in the revisionist history of the NDP, they're saying that the NDP put forth a motion and the Conservatives voted against it. That's not what happened.
No, it's complete misinformation. The truth is, very simply put, the Conservatives put forward a motion, vote number 197. And the NDP requested an amendment to that motion, to which the Conservatives said, no, we're keeping our motion the way it's written.
Yeah, they wanted to hijack the motion that the Conservatives put forward and essentially take credit for it and ignore the fact that there's a carbon tax on home heating across the country.
And if you go into the actual vote and look at the actual numbers, all the Conservatives supported this motion, of course, because it was put forth by their leader. But the NDP, the Liberals, and the Bloc all voted against this motion.
Right. Fast forward almost to the day 1 year later. Same motion is put forward. Now the NDP say they're going to support it. So, let's see why.
The Conservatives have again refused, but we've got to be the adults in the room. So given the panicked reaction from the Liberals, seemingly tied to their polling standing in Atlantic Canada, given that the Conservatives for once have actually offered a motion that doesn't deny climate change, we will be supporting that motion, and we'll see in the coming days giving more details about the NDP's climate action plan that we certainly hope, that we certainly know will be more effective than the lack of action we've seen from the Liberals over the last few years.
Julian, does anything change with this stance if the Liberals make it a confidence motion?
This is clearly not a confidence motion, but it is clearly an indication to the government that what they need to do is put in supports that help people right across the country. The reality is we have people who are struggling to make ends meet, to heat their homes over the course of the winter. And the panic action of last week really needs to be adjusted so that there is supports that go to people right across the country.
So there's your answer. The NDP are not willing to make this a confidence motion. They would have needed them in order to really do that. But the other thing to understand about this motion is that it's non-binding. The Liberals don't have to do this. But what it is, it's a signal to the Liberal government that the NDP have changed their stance. Remember, a year ago, the NDP voted against this exact motion. But now, it's funny, Julian is talking about the polling numbers for the Liberals and that they're panicking. Well, one would argue that the NDP are panicking because they're the ones that are actually flip-flopping now and supporting this motion. When last year they were criticizing this, that the Conservatives were supporting oil and gas and propping up big oil CEOs and all of this stuff. But now they're saying, oh, well, we're voting for this because the Conservatives, are actually not denying climate change. Well, they weren't denying climate change last year as well. They didn't even mention climate change. They were talking about affordability of Canadians and the ability to heat themselves over the winter.
Now, I don't have access yet to the bill or the recent motion, the one that's coming up, because it hasn't happened yet. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my eye on it, and I'm going to take the text of both motions and see how different it really is. Because we suspect, just by the sounds of it, that it's pretty well the exact same thing. And now the NDP are voting for it because it's advantageous for them to do so.
100%. It's a way for them to show their voters they're scoring a win over the Liberals because Trudeau changed his stance, right? So Trudeau changed his stance on carbon tax for home heating. So now is a chance for the wind watchers to try to get on the goodwill train that the Conservatives are riding and get a boost in the polls. That's exactly what's going on here. So time will tell. We'll see how it goes on Monday, and we'll report back.